Now, this is a big pipeline, isn't it? This is going to move hundreds of thousands of barrels of oil every day.
It goes through wetlands, goes through forested areas, it goes through...
These days, prices at the gas pumps are low and getting lower. New cars are selling like hotcakes. Politicians are happy, and issues of climate change and the environment seem to have been thrown under the bus while we celebrate our apparent good fortune. Canadian oil producers want to run more pipelines through America's Great Plains and through the land of 10,000 lakes. That's northern Minnesota. We welcome to the table for the first time Catherine Hoffman.
Thank you, Tim.
Catherine works for the Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy, which we're going to call MCEA from here on. Is that okay?
It is.
Now, Catherine, before we get into a discussion of the Sandpiper Pipeline, tell me a little bit about MCEA. What is it?
MCEA is an environmental organization that was founded in 1974. The idea behind MCEA is that we can work within all three branches of government. Our lobbyists can work up at the legislature to protect and improve environmental laws. Our policy experts and scientists can work with the administration to improve permitting and rulemaking. And then our lawyers, if necessary, can bring disputes to the courts if we believe that the federal or state government are not enforcing environmental laws the way that they should be.
Now, Catherine, the so-called Sandpiper Pipeline is presently before the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission. And in mid-December, the MCEA and the Friends of the Headwaters jointly filed an action asking Ramsey County District Court to order a full environmental impact statement, an EIS, for a proposed new oil pipeline between North Dakota and Superior, Wisconsin. Tell our viewers, what are we talking about up there? What is the Sandpiper Pipeline?
Yes, so this is a pipeline proposed by a Canadian company called Enbridge. And Enbridge already has an enormous network of oil pipelines across the United States, shipping oil from a variety of sources to a variety of refineries, both in the Midwest and down in the Gulf area. The Sandpiper Pipeline, if built, would cross from North Dakota through a little community called Clear Brook, which already has quite a bit of oil flowing through it, and then dip south and go directly across to Superior, Wisconsin. It's a 600-mile pipeline. About 300 miles of it would run through Minnesota.
What's their track record been over the years as far as safety?
Well, there are certainly some concerns with Enbridge's safety record. Most notably and most recently, in 2010, there was a spill near Marshall, Michigan, into the Kalamazoo River. This was from an Enbridge pipeline that was transporting oil from the Alberta tar sands in Canada. Initially, Enbridge didn't realize that it had happened, and ultimately over 800,000 gallons of oil spilled into the Kalamazoo River, traveled almost 40 miles downstream, and now, 4 years later, it still has not been cleaned up. In fact, there are areas that will probably never be cleaned up because it's very difficult to clean up oil spills. A group called the Polaris Institute estimated that between 1999 and 2010, Enbridge had over 800 spills on its system.
And right now, the application, the permitting process is vested with the Public Utilities Commission in Minnesota?
That's correct. The Public Utilities Commission is charged with overseeing the construction of large energy facilities such as pipelines, energy plants, even solar, things like that.
Can you be a little more specific as to just where this project is with the PUC?
Yes. So Enbridge filed its application to build this pipeline in 2013. And in mid-2014, the Public Utilities Commission referred the matter to a judge, an administrative law judge.
Okay.
And this is fairly common procedure for a project of this size.
And for what purpose was it referred?
Well, there's some fact-finding involved. The Enbridge has to obtain two permits from the Public Utilities Commission. One is called the Certificate of Need. You have to show that you need to build this pipeline, that there's demand for it. And the second is called the Route Permit. You show that the specific route is the best route available. But something unusual happened in this proceedings. The Friends of the Headwaters is a citizen organization that was formed specifically around this pipeline and their concerns about the impact that it might have on Hubbard County. And they joined the Public Utilities Commission proceedings, and they proposed several alternative routes. This is very unusual. Most of the time, the company proposes a route and then it moves forward. And so the Public Utilities Commission was faced with this challenge of looking at different possible locations for the pipeline. And they decided that this decision about the location of the pipeline should be part of the certificate of need proceedings. In other words, can the company show that the pipeline they need has to be in the location that they want it, or can it be in some other location? And so they took the certificate of need proceedings and they separated it from the route permit proceedings. So the certificate of need deals with these various locations, which they're referring to as system alternatives. Is it going to run through northern Minnesota? Will it run through the Twin Cities? Will it run through southern Minnesota? That's the discussion that's on the table right now. At a later date, if it moves forward to the route proceedings, then the PUC looks at the particular route proposed in a lot more detail. Are there localized features that the route needs to go around? A wetland, a highway, a piece of agricultural property that's particularly valuable, things like that. But at the moment, we're talking about a big picture question. Where does this pipeline go in the state of Minnesota? In the end, we're talking about how the different routes, the different potential locations compare to each other. Mm-hmm. So the fact that Enbridge's proposal is 75% existing corridor is only important when you look at the other proposals, some of which are 100% existing corridor. So that 25% is the difference between Enbridge's proposal and many of the other proposals. It goes through wetlands, goes through forested areas, it goes through some of the most clear lakes in Minnesota, it goes through some very susceptible groundwater aquifers, susceptible to groundwater contamination, according to the DNR. It goes through wild rice lakes. So all of these are resources that we value as a state, and we need to ask the question, is this the best place for this pipeline?
Now, I've read that one of the objections to the proposed route that Enbridge is promoting is that it gets into areas that aren't even accessible in the unfortunate event of a calamity occurring in the pipeline where there's a breakage and there'd be a need to repair the pipeline. Am I correct in that recollection?
That's correct, Tim. In fact, this is an issue that the Pollution Control Agency raised. If in the event of a spill, if you're talking about a remote stream or wetland, you've caused enormous damage and taken quite a bit of time just to get the equipment in there in order to start the cleanup. Mm-hmm. And in certain cases, you've destroyed the resource to the point where it can't be brought back. If you have a peatland or a stream, you can't just bulldoze it the way you might a farmland.
Like anything else, we have politics involved in this, and I know that Representative Nolan up in the 8th District is on record as stating in effect, well, we need a pipeline, but we don't like this location. It should be routed further south to get into more stable soil. Is that a position that your organization subscribes to?
That's correct. Friends of the Headwaters and MCA are not opposed to pipelines necessarily, but we are very concerned about this particular route that Enbridge has proposed. And this is why Friends of the Headwaters put forth these alternative routes which don't travel through the same sensitive resources that Enbridge's proposed route does.
Now, you were good enough to give us an explanation of what the Public Utilities Commission intends to do, but as a litigant, that apparently is not satisfactory to the FOH or to your organization. Can you tell me why?
Well, the Public Utilities Commission is neglecting to take an extremely important step in the planning of any large facility in Minnesota, which is to conduct an environmental impact statement. An environmental impact statement, and I want to talk a little bit about what the purpose of environmental review, because I think it's something that's widely misunderstood.
Please do.
A lot of people think that environmental review it's bureaucracy, it's red tape, it's a way for environmental groups to delay a project. We at MCA and Friends of the Headwaters feel differently. The purpose of environmental review is a planning document. It's not an opportunity to say yes or no to a project. It's an opportunity to plan the project so that it has the least impact on the environment. Environmental review would allow us to look at those 6 options and decide which one is the right one for the state of Minnesota to protect our natural resources. Here, the Public Utilities Commission has decided not to do that. They've decided that it's okay for them to make this decision without an environmental impact statement. It's not only the wrong decision for the state of Minnesota, it's also illegal. All of this is governed by the Minnesota Environmental Policy Act, which is a law that was passed back in the 70s. And it specifically prohibits agencies from approving any kind of permit or certificate or project without doing an EIS first. You can't do an EIS in the middle after you've had some approvals. You have to do your EIS at the very beginning before you've made any of your permit decisions so that it can inform all of them.
Now I assume to do an EIS would be quite time-consuming.
A good environmental impact statement would probably take 9 to 12 months to complete. There are various stages. There are opportunities for public input, which are a very important part of the process, and it does take time. But it's important to note that the Public Utilities Commission has already set up a system for this particular pipeline that will take time. They've taken the two permits, the Certificate of Need permit and the route permit, they've split them into two proceedings. The route permit comes second, and that has no schedule at all, and it will not be set for any kind of schedule until after the Certificate of Need decision has been made. So if the state of Minnesota, which we should do, is taking the time to make the right decision about this pipeline, then we ought to do it right so that we can make a fully informed decision.
Now this is a big pipeline, isn't it? This is going to move hundreds of thousands of barrels of oil every day.
That's right, 375,000 barrels per day from the Clearbrook location to Superior, Wisconsin.
Wow. And what kind of oil are we talking about?
This is oil out of the Bakken oil fields in North Dakota.
The oil that you get from fracking out in that area?
Correct.
And my understanding is that Enbridge itself has announced that the construction of this pipeline, should it be a certificate of need be issued, formally was going to begin in 2016, and now they're looking at 2017. So if there was an EIS, it would fall within that general time framework, apparently. Would that not be correct?
Right, I think that's correct.
So did you go to the Public Utilities Commission and say, hey, how about an EIS? Do you want to do that? Did you give an opportunity to adopt your recommendation?
We did. We did ask for an environmental impact statement. The Public Utilities Commission did not agree. They instead ordered the Department of Commerce to do much more abbreviated document that would compare the various routes. They hired a consulting firm called HDR, and HDR looked at the 6 routes and they generated a list of resources that are located near each of those 6 routes. How many wetlands, how many streams, how many rivers, how many groundwater aquifers, etc. The problem is that there's no analysis. There's no discussion of what the potential impacts of pipelines are. There's no
even analysis, no weighted analysis, nothing
right.
that you reach a logical conclusion from?
Right, exactly. There's nothing that helps the decision maker evaluate these criteria. So for instance, some of the routes are near more wetlands than others, but all wetlands are not created the same. For instance, some wetlands, like a peatland, might be much more difficult to clean or access if there was a spill in that area. An environmental impact statement, in contrast, would have to describe all of the risks of the project, compare the risks from each route specifically. It would have to make some recommendations about which route is environmentally preferable. It would have to describe mitigation measures, which are steps the company could take to try to decrease risk for each of those routes. And all of this would take place within a public process.
I assume that when you state that position to Judge Merriam over in St. Paul, she'll be probably write you an order right there. Is that how this is going to go?
Well, we hope so, Tim.
The CEO and company of Enbridge lied for weeks about the more dangerous.
The proceedings at the Public Utilities Commission are going ahead quickly, and we believe that they're doing so in violation of NEPA.
Our crossings are blocked for anywhere from 8 to 15 minutes.
There are public hearings. There are 5 of them scheduled, and they're all over the state in mid-January.
What is the purpose of those public hearings?
The purpose of those public hearings is for the administrative law judge, who's overseeing the public utilities proceedings, to hear input from the public. Anybody from the public can show up. They can provide their comments directly to the administrative law judge, and it's common for any expert witnesses in the matter to be present at some or all of the public hearings as well, so that they can respond if the public has questions.
Well, good luck in the lawsuit.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks for coming over.
Democratic Visions is independently crafted by volunteers from Eden Prairie, Minnetonka, Edina, and Bloomington.